Welcome back to 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll speak about turning the battleship. By turning the battleship, we're saying the slow turn that it requires to change a massive structure. But in this instance, that massive structure is the consciousness of modern day people.
Yeah, paradigm shift kind of thing. It's difficult.
But it takes a while. It takes a bunch of small events that add up to get people's attention, to slowly have them thinking about things, and then you put all this other stuff into their view, and it slowly starts to turn.
I think the issue that's ironic is that negative shit happens quickly. Positive shit takes a long time.
But the crazy part is the positive is way easier. It's so much easier to be nice. It requires much energy to hate a person and to hold on to that hate for decades.
But I think that's because when these people who are in charge or media, whatever you want to call them, they know the keywords. They know your triggers. They tap into them. Satan knows that is certain things that in this world, like women, sex, your insecurities, and they love it. And the Democrats do it all the time. They tap into your insecurities. We don't want another mass shooting. Then why don't you get some health care? We don't want this. Then make sure everybody's working. When everybody's working, you ain't got people at the book depository shooting shit up. You dig? Nobody wants to address the issue. They just want to address the response.
The Royal Society of London, the ruling body that controls science in the Western world for the past 300 years, has always had a problem with anything that was outside their paradigm. For example, when Percy Fawcett went to the Amazon and he came into contact with people who lived in what he called the lost city of Z, they did not believe him. He was not received well because, he's offering something that is not already known to them. It has to be accepted by their Masonic groups. And the Royal Society is straight up Masonic. This Royal Society has controlled basically how the Western world sees ancient cultures. They're the ones that help to set up the Smithsonian. We talked about that in the previous episode.
They decide who's civilized and who's not, basically.
Exactly. But the Royal Society and all those people that founded it, they're based off of reptilian technology and a state of mind. So what's funny about that is there's this movie that came out in the early 90s. It was called The Lair of the White Worm.
Yep, I remember that.
Really strange movie. It was about this guy who's a descendant of a guy that defeated this large reptile.
Yeah.
And in this movie, you see the descendants of that reptile as these reptiles that walk around with human flesh, and they have reptoid fangs and they can spit venom. So it was St. Patrick, and the whole St. Patrick's Day thing was this whole made up myth, right? But it's based on this guy that was sent by the Roman Empire to destroy the remaining, they say the snakes, but it was to destroy the remaining vestiges of ancient pagan worship and technology.
Yeah, snake was another term for the druids and stuff like that.
Right.
There was a term they used.
But what it was is that those druids people were in communication with people who lived deep within the earth. And so this movie that I mentioned, The Lair of the White Worm, the protagonist goes to slay the dragon, right? And it's this whole thing about keeping these reptilian people back inside the earth, out of the view, and keeping this theme going, right? This narrative that is, interrelated to the garden and the serpent, and how these reptilians have been influencing humanity for the longest time. So then you begin to wonder, well, why is there a shift going on now? Well, these people who study these ancient cultures like Egypt and Mesopotamia and Lemuria and Atlantis realize that we're living on this huge clock that moves throughout the surface of our galaxy, right? And so the Hindus, they call it the Kali Yuga. And there's different ages of the zodiac. There's different ages of time that man go through. And so the age of Taurus, lots of bull worship, Mithraic cults and sacrificing bulls and aggressive, bullish mentality that's based on the time they were living in. So a lot of primitive thinking based behavior That's in the Tauran age. And in the age of
Yeah.
Pisces, Jesus was born to usher in the age of Aquarius.
See, what people don't get when you talk about enlightenment, like when you talk about the broad culture, back when the music was different between the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, you heard this is the age of they were literally talking about these things in music. And if I tell you this, I don't want to sound racist, but that's when white folks had soul. Michael McDonald. Back then, you would hear white folks talk and sing differently. They were literally, I don't want to say that. I ain't trying to say like jive or shit like that because that's how we used to joke back then. But you had white folks that had real soul, KC and Sunshine Band, shit like that, and that's because it was a different enlightenment. People they knew of these other cultures, and we're not just talking crystals. We're talking about real studying.
Yeah, but check this out. But it's not just that. It goes back way before that. It goes back way before that because with the abolishment of slavery, you had everybody realizing that, okay, we cannot subjugate humans and make them our servants. That was a slow revolution that took hundreds of years
people understand
to dawn upon people. So then you eliminate slavery, and then you begin working on civil rights for people around the planet. And so there's this slow progression towards a greater enlightenment. And then you speed up that with the technological age. So after the industrial age, you have the technological age, and more people are now educated. With all these people that are educated now, it becomes obvious to anybody who is educated or anybody who is consciously aware that, hey, we cannot treat people like shit because there's going to be consequences and eventually there's going to be war. But we want peace so that our civilization can flourish. Therefore, we have to be more civil in our day-to-day interactions with people. So that's how you get the whole civil rights situation. But moving towards that and going into space with a Nazi technology, then there's this push for computers, which is based on chips that were found from alien technology that was crashed in these that helped start the transistor movement, which brought about computers, and the improvement in technology with the transistors allowed for chips on computers to be made.
I think we made a deal basically with the devil. Like, okay, we want to be successful. We want to have this technology.
Let's say they did, not we.
That is correct. They did. When I said we, I meant like this whole American thing, like how we want to compete. And so literally you had Nazis who had technology, but they also had the dark arts and they studied some other things. And so the need to be successful outweighed the need for good. And there's something you said that's really deep a while back is like, not everything we can do, we should do. Not every experiment needs to be done. We don't need to be doing certain things. There's no money in it. Why are we doing this? So that's my big issue with all these damn AI bots that everybody keeps, the AI bot said Jordan is the best basketball player, not LeBron. Like, why does it matter what a computer says? But the point is that, like, this goes back to what I was telling you, why do you need a computer to tell you something that is up to you? This is the lack. I call it artificial imagination. You know that. You know what I call it. But this is the thing where people don't want to think for themselves, or they want a definitive answer to something that's not definitive. And so I just think that's why that space race is one of those situations where, like, we got to be the best, or we got to beat somebody, or we got to have this.
Listen, it was based on lopsided occult technology. They subjugated the Native Americans. And because they did that, because they shut down ghost dances, they completely missed an entire earth-based narrative. Whereas a ghost dance actually heals the earth. And really, Native Americans in these ghost dances are janitors for the boiler room that is the planet Earth.
Yep, I dig it.
But you're not taught that. That stuff is kept away from you because you're not taught to see these people as wiser than those who come from the East and swear they know everything, but they all about pyramids, but they can't build one.
They didn't accomplish anything. I think the other deep part...
They're posers.
...is really one of these things that is hard to talk about because you want us not to talk about religion anymore. Like, you can't talk about religion at all. You can't even say Jesus' name. You can't pray. We talked about it last time. But then at the Grammys, you have these whole satanic rituals in front of you. It was the same thing back then. We're told to separate church and state. But if you pay attention to these guys that were doing this rocket stuff back in the day and go back 7-8 podcasts, we talk about it. where they were doing religious ceremonies and they were summoning this and summoning that before they did they started using these rockets. So I'm like, wait a minute. So they tell me and you, hey, you ain't supposed to have, this relationship with God and technology, but they're doing it. And that's how they got to be successful, was they were talking to other people, or they were reaching out to other things. And so it's just odd that they do as I say, not as I do. You dig? They're telling us, yeah, you can't be successful and worship God, but all of them worship some God that we don't agree with. That's the hustle. That's the Jedi mind trick they play on us.
So this Royal Society that I was speaking about earlier, they control the sciences, they control the STEM, and they control the mindset of the people that teach on universities in these scientific faculty. But then that started to change as we got closer to the 1990s. In the 1990s, physicist Roger Penrose teamed up with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff to propose an ambitious proposition. They claim that the brain's neuronal system forms an intricate network and that the consciousness this produces should obey the rules of quantum mechanics, which is the theory that determines how tiny particles like electrons move around. They argue this could explain the mysterious complexity of human consciousness. Penrose and Hameroff were met with resistance. Quantum mechanical laws are usually only found to apply at very low temperatures. Quantum computers, for example, currently operate at around minus 272 Celsius. At higher temperatures, classical mechanics take over. Since our body works at room temperature, you would expect it to be governed by the classical laws of physics. For this reason, the quantum consciousness theory has been dismissed outright by scientists, though others are persuaded by the findings of Penrose and Hameroff, and support for Penrose and Hameroff's findings are being met with growing support. So this study in consciousness, you're beginning to see this more and more in the scientific journals. It's fascinating because people are interested in this, despite the fact that the Royal Society of London and all these Ivy League universities want to control how people think and what people say, because they don't like change. So let's talk about the micro and the macro. There was a guy, he won a Nobel Peace Prize. His name is Sir Paul Nurse. And he has a book out now. It's called What is Life? And in that book, he talks about that we are underestimating the cells of the human body. And he notes that every cell is a living entity endowed with all the properties that characterize living organisms. So then each of these cells has memory, and they have DNA in them. So then each one has this blueprint of who you are. Collectively, they form your being. But it's like a car or any other type of mechanical thing. There's different parts to that. But yet, collectively, they make up the thing that is that entity, right? Or that thing, or that piece, that unit. So then studies have found that the heart can stop, but so long as the brain is alive, people can be revived. But then there's also been studies, though, that when a person has been found brain dead, they're still alive, which is strange. And then there's all these studies into these out-of-body experiences and life after death. And that's how that brings us to a guy named Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow made billions of dollars from the hotel industry. He was the owner of Motel 6. And so he made all his money off of the hotels, the motels. And then he put his money into the space program. And so then what he began to do is make these expansion modules, kind of like tiny homes for the space station.
Military contract, shit like that. NASA,
so yes, money. That's correct. But see, then what he encountered in working in the space program were entities that he had never seen before. And so he had this CBS 60 Minutes interview 5 years ago, 2018. And in this interview, he says there are aliens walking among us now. Why would this billionaire want to lie and muddy the waters with this? This guy has nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. So what would cause him to say these things? What would cause him to say, hey, look, I have worked in the space program for NASA as a contractor, and I have seen aliens walking around amongst us camouflaged as humans. That's crazy.
Look, the thing is, when you got enough money, you ain't worried about the veil. You know, he ain't scared.
No, he's not scared. He's not scared because Meanwhile, while he was doing that, he put millions of dollars into researching a place in the Uinta Basin in Utah called Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Skinwalker Ranch was really weird because that property, that place on Earth, is based on your intentions, meaning what you intend to do when you go in there will determine your outcome. That is based solely on consciousness and awareness.
Look, but this goes back to the bottom line that when you're talking about you got technology over here and you got spirituality down here. No, they're not separate things. They're equal. They're right next to each other. Your spirituality, your belief system, your technology, all that stuff goes together, because why else would he spend money on a place like that trying to figure out what's going on there? And even the myth or the legends, I don't want to say myths, the legend of the Skinwalker, that's some crazy shit. You know what I'm saying? So whatever these Native Americans encountered there, they're letting you know, like, hey, it's some crazy shit here. You need to be careful.
But at Skinwalker Ranch, what these people encountered were entities that one could say are made from plasma.
They
Now,
shapeshift. They can change their appearance.
Exactly. So these shapeshifters that were on Skinwalker Ranch, they would terrorize people. They would terrorize these grizzled veterans of combat and special forces.
People who wasn't pussies.
The hardest men you could ever imagine were broken down to their elements, which is strange, though, because then what these people experienced, this is what broke them down further. First they got broke down in person when they went to the ranch. Then they got these hijackers, these spiritual or hitchhikers that came along with them to their home and terrorized them spiritually in their homes. So these trickster spirits have always been around, and you hear about them in African culture, you hear about them in Mesoamerican culture, you hear about them in Asian culture. They're everywhere. But really what they are, they're an intermediary step between here and the spirit realm. And so there's a researcher, UFO researcher, his name is Jacques Vallée, and he wrote a book called Passport to Magonia. And he would talk about how when you go further up in the atmosphere, the air is less breathable, the oxygen is thinner, and nothing can really live up there except for things that move about in the air. And so now we come to the UFO encounters that these fighter pilots were seeing in 2017, 2004, 2018, even to this day, all over the U.S., all off the coastline, all around the world. They're seeing these Tic Tacs, these little white Tic Tac things that they think are crafts, but they're actually plasma energy. Now, park that there for a second, because in recent studies with plasma energy, they're finding plasma, which is the fourth state of matter. Once you create plasma in a laboratory, if you keep it alive past a certain time, it becomes aware. It becomes aware and becomes sentient, and it starts to develop consciousness. And they're seeing this through the actions, its own actions, right? And how it moves in the laboratory when poked and prodded. And it's allowed to exist for a certain amount of time. So then when you see these fighter pilots who are in these like $20 million jets, these fourth generation jet fighters flying around, and they don't want to smoke because they have nothing for these plasma entities that can start at 80,000 feet and drop down to 9 feet above the seawater level in 2 seconds.
Look, hey, what I was going to say, this dude I work with was saying, he said, I think some of these UFO sightings, those could be angels. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, look, we don't know what angels look like. And in the Bible, it talks about stars stay in the sky. So when you hear this shooting star, Lucifer, yada, 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 he said, how do you know some of these things ain't angels? Because we don't know what they look like. He's literally said, like, plasma stuff, you don't know what that is. And what you're saying now, that's some profound shit. That's some real profound shit that you know, you don't sometimes when you don't have a reference point to describe something, you're like, oh, it looks like a ball of light, but it might be something else, So I think that a lot of the shit we're seeing is real. I think people think that, oh man, it's a figment of my imagination. No, it's not. You seen some shit out the corner of your eye that was some real shit, whether it was passing from one dimension to another, whether it was a shadow being, whatever. But there's some shit going on. I just think, like you said, I think technology matters also. I think technology has a lot to do with this shit, and I think sometimes we dismiss stuff because we don't have a technological word for it. You know what I'm saying? Like literally, like okay, that I can't see. I can't comprehend it. I can't use my calculator. There's nothing to measure that. That don't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that's the hustle.
So in January 20th, 2021, Bob Bigelow was interviewed by George Knapp, and Bigelow explained the origin of his new BICS Institute. BICS is an acronym, and it's the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies. But basically, in this interview with George Knapp, Bigelow says in the 1940s, when he was a small child, his parents had a UFO encounter. Wow. And they were so shaken up, they didn't speak about it for the longest time, but he remembered it. And he remembered the effect that it had on them.
Was he there, or he just heard them talk about it as they got older?
So he heard them talk about it.
Okay.
He heard them talk about it, and he saw, as a kid, he could see the effect that it had on his father when he just couldn't speak about it. And he, because it shifted his whole paradigm, because his parents, and he grew up in this Western mentality that was based off of science that was created by the Roman Catholic Church and the Royal Institute. I mean, the Royal Academy.
Hold on. Something you said earlier, about 20 minutes ago, when you were talking about cells and bones. I saw this black doctor talking, and he said some deep shit that I was. So much of the shit we got now is bullshit that we don't know the difference between bullshit and real shit. So he was talking about cells, like you were talking. He said every 2 years your bones basically recreate themselves. He said those cells die, recreate, just die, recreate. And he said in 2 years you don't have the same. These are all new cells. He talked about the cells in your body.
Yeah. Your body completely. That's well known though. The body, the whole body regenerates itself in 7 years.
Yeah, well, it wasn't even that long. But the point he was making is that that you can control you can control everything about your body.
Okay, think of it like this. Think of it like this. So, you know how an Etch-a-Sketch works, right?
Oh yeah.
You draw something and you shake it up. So think of your body as an Etch-a-Sketch with memory, and you can draw back into those same lines that you drew back on. Or you can slightly alter the line and make it a little bit curvier and more accurate. The problem is that the cells store memory. So that if you develop IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and you do not correct your diet and your sedentary lifestyle, you're going to keep writing that DNA biological code
in the wrong direction.
You keep writing this DNA biological code, and it'll have that flaw every time. So that dis-ease remains with you until you correct the error. And that applies for every inch of your body.
But see, hold on. The reason that's so deep is that means that you can correct whatever you got going on. It might take a year. It might take, even with the bones.
But we're taught by the Royal Society and their Rockefeller medication system is that you got to be cut and you got to be drugged for them to fix you, and you can't fix yourself.
You can't fix yourself. So that's what I meant about real science and fake science. There's real science out there that we're not being taught. The stuff that if you get taught this, you can fix all your ailments. You can fix whatever problem you have, hair loss, big toe, little dick, whatever the fuck, you can fix it. But the problem is that they can't commercialize it and they can't make money off it. So that's the whole thing. But like I said, when he said it, I do kind of remember something like that. He's like, there's no such thing as a heart attack. He said, we attack the heart by our diet. We attack the heart with our lifestyle, and eventually the heart gives out because of it. the heart's not attacking you. He was just saying some shit that I'm like, and it was old. You can see the grain. It was an old video. You can see like the tracking was messed up, and I'm like, I dig it.
Tracking.
You remember that shit? So, but that's the point. When you were saying what you were saying earlier, you kind of stopped. And I was like, that's the direction I was trying to take. It was the fact that, any of the information that we could possibly use to fix ourselves has been eliminated. And so now when anybody even says it, you like that guy's a quack, or that's a conspiracy theorist, or you use all these terms to take that power away. So like what you're talking about right now. Now fast forward to you're talking about Bigelow's experience or his parents' experience. Like, look, I've seen UFOs. Now I ain't ever seen a little alien, no shit like that, but I've seen some. I even saw something last week when I called you, and the thing is, there's two or three of these things that happen to me that, yeah, they do change you. They make you, like, when I say you're scared to go outside, I'm not scared of something happening. I'm scared of seeing some shit. Because once you see certain shit, you can't unsee it. Those experiences are etched on your soul, and you're like, now, where do I place this? And that's what happens. What you were saying earlier about you got these, like, rough-ass military motherfuckers, like the toughest Marines in the world. Yeah, I've seen everything. Then they see some shit. Oh, I do not know where this goes. And then you're scared. It's not scared because you're a pussy. You're scared because, damn, everything I knew no longer exists. Everything that I
Can't go back.
thought.
Can't put the genie
Yes.
back in the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't. Some things are, they're like you're a visual virgin. You can't unsee shit. The internet created a situation where there's things that we heard of as you can conceive, but conceiving it and actually seeing it in, like, oh, two girls in a cup. That. Yeah, that kind of shit. But that's what also, there are things that happen in this universe that are like that. When you see a UFO, when you see something that, okay, it lights up and it takes off, or you see something go so fast, like, okay, either that thing went into a portal and disappeared, or that thing just shot off at super speed. That's the shit we're talking about. And then that's when you also, you're no longer scared of the military. You're no longer scared of these guys with guns when you realize there's somebody bigger than them out there. That's that part. It's hard to explain, but you can't be intimidated when you realize, like, hey, y'all niggas don't have real power, that kind of thing, So, yeah, I dig what Bigelow was saying. I'm sure he probably listened to his parents for years as he got older and tried to get them to explain it to him. And sometimes you don't want to explain it, not because you can't, because you don't want to suck somebody into this bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like, ugh, you don't want to know this.
Right. So, the crazy part about all this is that, okay, so Bob Bigelow is not stopping. Like, he's going forward with this Bigelow Institute of Consciousness research, right? And so the 2023, when you go to the BigelowInstitute.com.org, you see this they're giving out $1 million in grants. And it says the 2000, and this is real money. This dude, this is his own money he's doing this shit.
Yeah, he got it like that.
Yeah, so he can give out $1 million in grants of his own money. And so the 2023 BICS grant program, quote unquote, the challenge, will fund research into contact and communication with post-mortem or discarnate consciousness, also known as the afterlife or the other side, leading to the reception of higher order information of value to humankind, also known as wisdom acquisition, with the allocation of a grant total up to $1 million. Now, what type of projects will be considered? There are two. The first is communication. Projects must focus on contact or communication with post-mortem or discarnate consciousness through the use of robust methodologies. The second one is wisdom acquisition. Projects must focus on reception of verified higher order information of general value to humankind, otherwise known as wisdom acquisition. Who can apply for this? Anyone who has experience, expertise, and qualifications in the field of survival of consciousness, including communication with consciousness after physical death, may apply for funding. Wow. So there you go. So if you got the chops, you can get up to $1 million in grant funding from a billionaire to work on this stuff. That's deep.
What it is that he knows, not feels, not believes. He knows there's something out there,
Right, but
and
this is the turning of the battleship, and this is when you really feel it starting to turn. Is when you see stuff like this, among some of the other things that I quoted earlier. So,
look,
but let's talk about plasma and consciousness. So, quantum physics says the smaller something is, the less fixed its position is in reality. Making a structure with fixed electrons would be highly improbable. Plasma waves are easy to detect. Look at a candle that's flickering. That is 10 hertz of chemical plasma wave. Right. A plasma is a conductor, and therefore it is also a capacitor. A capacitor stores energy but does not create energy. The sun's power comes from nuclear fusion in its core. So its capacitance, so the capacitance of the sun does not increase the power of the sun. So, plasma waves and consciousness. Now, if these things aren't fixed, that means they can move. So that means they can move to different points in any space and any time based on what's holding them together. This is really interesting stuff, but it's only cutting edge because it's being taught now. It's cutting edge if you see it as science. It's not cutting edge if you have been practicing the mystic arts for some time. You just call this something else by a different name, by location. There are several instances from France where there was a monk who could bilocate. He could be in two places at one time. To give you an idea of what this looks like, Luke Skywalker did this in the Last Jedi, where he was fighting Kylo Ren, and he was talking to his sister at the same time. But the crazy part is he projected his astral body to go fight Kylo Ren and go talk to his sister, and then he was actually still on the island of Anch-To at the same time. Now, here's the thing. That has been done before in history, and you hear about it in medieval France. You hear about it in Asia, in medieval Japan. You hear about it in the history of China. You hear about it in the history of India. You hear about this people being highly advanced spiritually doing these things. But this goes back to something I said a long time ago, and it's how they want you, the Royal Society, to suckle on their teat and let them give you the information. Whereas that's why they chose to suppress the Native Americans and the ghost stands. That's why they chose to suppress the true identity of the Moors. That's why they chose to suppress all the information about Egypt. That's why they had Saboteur go into the Library of Alexandria and steal stuff and then burn, because then you can hide theft in arson. See, people are so focused on the arson, they're not thinking about what was taken.
And look, we talk about book burnings, but it's the information that's lost. that's nobody cares about the physical arson. Yeah, we put the fire out and we're scared. No. It's about the information that's been lost or hidden, or like I said, they got two copies.
Mm-hmm.
They got a copy they kept for themselves.
Okay, so let's talk about the research of a professor named Philip Callahan. So he began to look into diamagnetic and paramagnetic landscapes. Diamagnetic landscapes they break up magnetic lines. An example of this would be European sandstone cathedrals. Now, these cathedrals, sonically, they can generate tones that can open other dimensions, and that's cool. But they don't resonate with the human spirit. So it's a cold spiritual energy. See? So there's degrees, there's levels to this. So it's more cold spiritual energy. And these European sandstone cathedrals, you don't feel anything emotionally when you go in there. It's dead emotionally. But when you look at something like the pyramids that are made from limestone and paramagnetic limestone. So paramagnetic energy, right? Paramagnetic landscapes, they're coherently conductive to magnetic lines. And so that's why people have these mystical experiences when they go into the pyramids or any pyramid that's made of limestone. But when you go into these European cathedrals made from sandstone, you don't really have any mystical experience, right? So Callahan visited the Amazonian jungles, and he wanted to make sure that the people living there were peaceful, or if they were warlike headhunters. So he measured the soil to check for paramagnetic flux. So the soils with paramagnetic flux is where the peaceful people lived. Now, underneath that is the water table. The water table affects the magnetic properties of the soil above it, right? It's the same way a gas stove can boil a pot, okay? So, if the magnetic lines between these areas break, then war happens. Think Palestine and Israel, okay? Or think Congo, all right? Or the Rwanda and the Tutsis, right?
It literally means that your environment has an effect on you. And when that shit happens, you respond in a certain way.
Right. So,
it's predictable.
Thus, by restoring the magnetic lines and the water table underneath, peace returns. The magnetic rivers run throughout the planet. The best communication towers have been placed by crossing over these magnetic rivers. So, I talked about this in during the first 50 podcasts, first episodes. And we talked about how there was a guy that was building the telegraph line, and he would bury these copper boxes as amplifiers. So when the line ran 100 feet, you place another copper box in the ground, and it works as an amplifier.
It's like an underground antenna kind of thing.
That's bump dope. Up, it amplifies the signal, right, until you get to the next pole. And so what he found is that the earth stores energy from the sun in it. And there's waves. There's waves like the ocean, but waves of energy like the ocean that rise and fall with the magnetic energy that's being generated by the sun, which is why sunspots are so very important. Now, there was a book that I have. It's called The Tutankhamun Prophecies. In this book, it talks about how the sunspots are tied to fertility and brain activity in human beings. And the Mayans studied these sunspots along with the Egyptians to determine if the civilization was going to have issues with birth and death rates that year or that decade. So this guy working on these telegraph lines learned about this energy that's stored by the sun, but it's related to sunspots and magnetic waves as well. But these diamagnetic and paramagnetic landscapes will determine if this is a good place to live in, which is why Israel was probably placed in a bad place, because it's diamagnetic. There's always fighting there. See,
Palestine and Israel will always fight, regardless of whatever peace treaty you come to.
Right. We're so caught up with everything that's going on the surface that we don't look into the secret science and be like, okay.
But those are symptoms. Yeah, those are symptoms of this. If the environment ain't proper.
Just like dis-ease. Everybody wants to treat the symptoms, and they don't want to cure the problem.
There's no money in a cure, bro. There's no money in a cure. You know that.
Right. Right. Now, then you get into what is called array embedding. And when you go to a lot of these sacred sites, there's star maps. There's star maps that are placed around the sacred sites. They're in the Southwest U.S. They're in Mexico. They're in Angkor Wat, Southeast Asia. They're in South America. They're in Egypt. They're in Northern Europe. They're all over the world, these star maps. And using star maps to place at sacred sites around the world give you leverage and reference points while navigating lucid dreams.
Ooh.
Right, right, right. See, this is the problem, man. We get so caught up in the physical that we can't make the leap, and we can't see how this affects us spiritually and in the astral realm.
Yeah, whether it's a message from your future self or whether it's like your own simulation, like, okay, I can work this out in my mind. And then you ever think about like these inventors, like these ancient Benjamin Banneker, or these guys that he invented that clock that still works, today. He envisioned it in his mind. He produced it in his mind first. You know what I'm saying? Like literally created everything. Then he comes and puts it in physical form. He manifests it. So you literally can do everything in your mind first, in your soul, spirit realm, whatever you want to call it first, and then you introduce it to this reality. But that's what we're not taught to do. That we're literally taught that that's your imagination, or that's stupid, or you're not understanding something. Look, sometimes there's a fine. What old boy say? There's a fine line between schizophrenia and enlightenment. It's tough because you might think you're crazy, and people start telling you you're crazy. You go crazy, but when truthfully, you're having an awakening. You're like, okay, I'm transitioning from this to the next level, and in that time, there's some growing pains. There's some difficulties, and so literally they're sticking you on medication to stop you from ascending. Don't you agree?
Well, yeah. Listen, but all of that is part of a process that's meant to manage your evolution.
Look, okay, right. Let's talk about regressing. Like right now, there is literally an attack. They don't understand what's going on. Watch a couple of videos, read a couple of books. Penises are literally shrinking right now. Penises, no, seriously, this is not a joke. A centimeter a year.
Because we're not doing man shit.
Oh no! This is real,
and it has to do with all the phthalates and plastics that are in the water and the foods that we're drinking, which is why I have made an effort. Hold on, that all the water I drink, I'll pour it into a pitcher at home. I'll pour it into a pitcher at home, or I have some type of I have a ceramic, or I have some type of
stainless steel
glass pitcher, and I'll pour the water into it because. Go ahead.
No. I said the reason I brought it up. They literally talking about the Y chromosome is dying, and they can't figure out why. Like literally, boys they don't have a full Y chromosome now. These people there's adults, and this goes back. It's all about the water. Never dismiss the water. Look, in fact, with these water purification. Okay, so dude broke it down even worse. He was talking about the birth control pills. So you got millions, if not billions, of women on birth control. They take these pills, they piss it out, of course, but these water treatment plants aren't designed to take care of hormones and shit like that. So literally, you pee it out, they purify the water, and they give it back to you. They don't purify it completely. You need to be filtering your water and doing shit.
Listen, part of the reason why you got young dudes on boner pills is because they aren't man enough, meaning their testosterone is low. And,
yes, the environment,
and the environment is slowly poisoning us.
What makes it so profound is that it's not just they're not doing man stuff. They have no desire to do man stuff, and that's what was crazy about it. And when you see these athletes, you used to always see athletes coming from poor areas, and you see a lot of them come from poor areas, but you see more of them coming from rich areas now. Before you didn't see that because those rich kids, their parents make sure they're not drinking crazy water and shit. The first time I found out about this phthalate shit, I was like at Olive Garden with my old lady, and you see these white folks bring their own like Corningware. Like, oh, I don't want your doggy bag. I don't want your styrofoams. And they would pop out their shit and put their leftovers in that. And you see them put it in their Corningware and shut it up. And I'm like, wow. And then you start looking into it. Why are these white folks doing this? Because they're protecting themselves. Like, look, I get it. The whole mask thing that was that bullshit science we're talking about. But the real science is out there telling you that you have everything from atrazine, which we've talked about on several podcasts.
Makes the frogs gay.
It makes the girl frogs have dicks and the boy frogs lay eggs. That's the truth. And if you want the black doctor who's like had all the studies on that is that black guy with the ponytail out of fucking Compton. And when you see this nigga, you're like, oh, this is a joke. He's not a joke. He said this is the most common pollutant found in water is atrazine. And then you got the phthalates, like my brother just told y'all. That shit, it imitates estrogen. But it has no benefit to your body. But it looks like estrogen and attacks. So what's happening is there is a physical, and then there's also this media blitz on masculinity. And that if you're masculine, you're bad. Don't get me wrong. There is bad masculinity out there. I'm not fronting. I got a female in the heat. And I got my dog outside barking for hours trying to get at her. There is bad masculine energy. It does happen. But masculinity, outright, just in its initial form, is not bad. And what you got to understand is they don't want any more warriors. When you find out the research for all this shit was done years ago, like 50, 60 years ago, that means they did this shit on purpose. This was the long range plan. Like, okay, every time we try to take over the world, we fail because of fucking G.I. Joe and the fucking Jedis and the Transform. We fail because these real men step up to the plate and do the shit. So let's eliminate the real men. And that's what they're doing right now. And that's also, we're talking about like we're talking about all this spirituality, all this technology. We're talking about skinwalkers and religious motherfuckers. Like, you literally are beat up for even talking about religion now. So, but back in the day, you couldn't shut a real Christian up. Back in the day, you couldn't shut up a real Muslim. You couldn't shame that nigga. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't shame Malcolm. You couldn't shame them people. That's what happens when you lose that that X chromosome. When you lose that true masculinity, then all of a sudden you're left with scraps, and you're easily controlled by the people in charge now.
Right. Exactly. It makes you easier to control because now we've tamed the savage. We've got
no reason to fight back.
These loud, powerful, crazy people are now under control. But then you get a situation. All right, you want to know what the future looks like if they get their way? Japan. Japan has a serious problem because the men have been emasculated, right? If you look at all the images of what is considered like an attractive man, they look like hermaphrodites. And they're exporting all these soft ass dudes.
Androgyny, you can't tell who's
they're exporting these soft ass dudes is like, oh, this is it. The birth rates are down. So I'm like, so you telling me nobody wants to bang these Japanese chicks?
It was a warrior culture. You have people, you had samurais, you had shoguns.
But they had their back broken by the United States when they dropped that bomb on them. And they took away their military. And they took away their masculinity. But the crazy part is, the Japanese started doing it to themselves about 70 years before when they took the swords away from the samurais in the late 1800s. So this is what can happen here if people don't make the changes in their own homes. See, okay, the problem a lot of people have is that they want the nanny state to do everything for them. And they want to tell them, hey, well, this is in your food. We're not going to put this in anymore. No, you have to be an informed consumer. You have to know that, look, okay, I can't drink the tap water because that's fucked up, So I got to drink water that's actually good for me. But then again, I can't be drinking this water out of plastic bottles all the time. Sometime, okay, it's okay to drink out of plastic bottles sometime. But the water that you're storing in your refrigerator, store that in a glass pitcher. All right? In a pitcher a big old glass pitcher, put it in there, and then when you're pouring out water to have some dinner, or you came in from running or working out playing basketball, pour yourself some water. Listen, man, you and I grew up drinking tap water, dude.
Hold it. I was about to say, look, one of my homeboys pointed out, he said, you remember when we was kids, there was glass everywhere. Hey, clearly Canadian, Miller Lite bottles. It was glass everywhere. Now you don't see any glass in the streets. It like literally, people told you it's for your own safety, not realizing that plastic bottle was going to have a long-term detriment to you. You feel me? Like,
but that was put in your head though.
Yeah, because you remember, man, we were kids. My cousin fell on a bottle, cut his knee up bad.
Hey, listen, I'm gonna tell you something. If y'all cannot find a glass bottle at the store, this is what you do: go to the liquor store, get yourself a 40 ounce. You don't have to drink it. You don't have to drink it. Just take the 40 ounce and pour it out, wash it out good, and you keep it in your car and use that to drink water out of.
A good old 8-ball bottle. You know what I'm saying?
And guess what? And it's water. So you don't have to worry about mold forming in there. It's just water. Now, you might have to wash it out like, once a month. But, hey, that's just water. You can straight up do that.
Look, what we're telling you is that we've been blinded so badly and so thoroughly that, like, you don't know who's good and bad. Mm-hmm. And like I said, we're so afraid of being called crazy, or we're so afraid of being called a religious zealot, or we're so afraid of being called anti-this and anti-Semitic. And even though you're Shemitic to begin with, but you're so afraid of those terms. Like, I think what happened is that we were finally able to use the term racist correctly. And now other people are piggybacking from our success in the sense that, hey, man, you're a racist. Don't do that shit. And now they're like, okay, you're this. You're anti-Semitic. You're this. And then you're afraid to speak up, even though you might be telling the truth. But you don't want to be called you don't want to be called a nigger lover. You don't want to be called this.
But bringing it back to consciousness, I want to share something that it's always in my immediate consciousness, my immediate awareness. And so I saw this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's called Fight Club. And
yeah. For sure.
In that movie, the main character is dating a specific type of woman. And he asks her, why do you hang around me? She says, I'm only in your life because this is what you are attracting to you. And so that is something I've meditated on for a long time. In Buddhism, it teaches that your reality is what you see based on your awareness level. And not just what you're paying attention to, it's what you're projecting into your immediate existence. So then imagine like an old school TV dial. If you just reach out with your consciousness and twist the dial and turn to another channel, you'll see everything like a pinwheel just turn and shift, and you have a different version of that reality in front of you now. So that what you've been seeing now has been shifted to an altered version of that. Because I can tell you that the people that are around me now are not the people that were around me 15 years ago.
But that's because you have your own gravity. You're like the sun. So you think you control what gravitates to you. As your pull gets stronger, you probably pull a different kind of person. Mm-hmm. We hang out with different people. We became enlightened early. But we also understood, I gotta compartmentalize my friends.
Okay. But listen, you got different friends like you got different pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
Like I got boots. I got boots where if I'm going stomping out into the wilderness, I'm putting those on. I'm not putting my nice kicks on.
I'm not talking
when
about
you go fishing. When you go fishing, you're not gonna put on your nice shoes to go.
You want to be comfortable.
Exactly, but you don't want to think about those shoes. You want to step with confidence. And stepping with confidence means I'm going to put my foot down in mud, in water, in dirt, in sand, in gravel. And it doesn't matter because these shoes are built for punishment.
These boots are made for walking.
The same applies for your friends. You have friends that you have basic ass pedestrian conversation with. And then you have friends where y'all put on the pressurized suits and you go into the realms.
You're going deep. You're going in outer space, or you're going down to the ocean depths.
Right.
You're going deep.
Right. But listen, you got some friends that have to stay in a certain weight class. They can't fight above their weight class.
How about this? You have some friends that want to have intelligent conversations, but they don't bring any intelligence. You do in that situation.
Or what it is, they're coming to you and they just throw you the football, hoping that you'll throw a tight spiral back to them.
Exactly.
Because they know that if they come to you, you're going to drop some gems.
Each and every day.
So with this Buddhist concept of shifting your reality through your perception and your intention is indeed powerful stuff. And you will see this should you begin to apply this to how you think about things. So I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about growth. And one of the things that a lot of people don't do is they don't say, I don't do that no more. Right? When you think about growth, it's like, man, I got this car now. I got this house. I got this money in the bank. I'm going to be doing this, woo-de-woo. You think about gain. You think about gain in the equitable sense.
Yep.
But people don't think about gain as in losing negative traits.
Yeah, but that's deep. Like, I don't do that anymore. I don't pee the bed anymore.
Right.
You know, I don't hang out late anymore.
Or I don't eat this food anymore. You know, that was straight up trash. You know, listen, man, I ain't gonna bullshit. I like the taste of Pringles. But that shit is straight trash, dude. It is not good for you at all.
That shit should be eaten once a year.
Dude, when you understand how they make them and what it is, they're like, listen, if I eat this, I need to shit this out right away.
Immediately. I need to do a cleanse.
Right.
But like I said, the two things that people just we learn late in life is that sugar is the most addictive thing on the planet. Mm-hmm. It's not cocaine, it's sugar. And then when you realize they spray all the junk food with sugar, even when it comes to like meat, you're like, why are you spraying
stuff that's not supposed to have any sugar on it at all?
So a savory taste is. You see sucrose, dextrose, and all these different stroses, but that's how they get you hooked on it. Because once you get hooked on sugar, it's hard to get off. And even when you sit there and have that fast, and you're eating fruit, and you're like, oh, fruit has sugar, but fruit also has fiber. The fiber is what fixes you. That's the balance. But this other shit you eating, nah, and it's designed to get you hooked.
But it's not even that though. Like, then you have stuff that's made that has been sprayed with glyphosate. You know, and then you got like
Cheerios and oats and you can't even have oatmeal.
And that's such a shitty situation. It's just like, man, like I just want a bowl of oatmeal, dude. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you're laughing, but what people don't get is it's one thing when you spray it in the field. It's another thing. Why do you spray it after harvest? It's already going. It's about to go to the factory. You spray it again for what? For what?
Right.
It's to fuck up your health. You ain't got bugs that bad when you need that extra shit. Excuse me, that's a herbicide. This is not even a pesticide. This is a herbicide.
No, dude, that is genocide.
Yeah, that's the only side that matters. It's genocide. And it's suicide because you're consuming your own demise. Look, the whole point of this conversation was to talk to you about enlightenment, and people don't recognize that once you find the real stuff, you kind of want to witness to somebody else and tell them. They might call you crazy. So sometimes you got to make that change individually first before you try to fuck with somebody else, because all the information you're getting is wrong. And they're literally telling you to wear a mask when we all know wearing a mask in the long run will fucking give you cancer because you're not getting enough oxygen.
But that turning of the battleship in that situation, it turned pretty fast. That was like the Lamborghini of battleships of that instance of turning. But regarding consciousness, it's taken a while. But here's the thing. When you get to these ages, when you get into a new age, and this being the new Aquarian age, there's lynch points, right, where it hooks together. And so a slow ride up to that, and then when you get to that point, that actual dawning, that beginning, then things speed up, because now it's like, all right, let's hurry up and get into this. You know what I mean? Because it's a turning point. So then, like, when you're like going straight on the road, and then you turn, it's a fast turn. It's not a slow turn,
No,
right?
it's like
It hooks around. It hooks into
like
it.
like a 90-degree turn.
It's like a 90-degree turn, exactly. So it's like, here you go. And then that once you turn into it, there's an adjustment period where everything is all about that.
That's true. That's very true. When you first find this out, like everything, you start seeing it everywhere. It's like when you buy a car. I see that car everywhere now. You're seeing it, and you're like, okay. How did I miss it before?
Because that car is part of your immediate consciousness now, right? And it's like, you were thinking about getting this car. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this Jeep. And then all of a sudden, you're not thinking about Jeeps. You don't even see them. And then all of a sudden, that's all you see, is because that you're co-creating that part of your reality.
You're rewriting everything.
Mm-hmm. And your subconscious is like Jeep. So then you're seeing these Jeeps, all about the Jeep. Everything you see is all about. It's everywhere, parked next to you, across from you. You see it on the other side of the highway going down the road, different colors. Dude, it's everywhere. But again, that is not only for something material, like an automobile or a watch or some sneakers, tennis shoes.
Yes.
Expand that to your higher faculties, and, listen, watching little YouTube videos is fine, but go to the store. Go to a metaphysical bookstore, because here's the thing. If you go to a metaphysical bookstore, you're going to stumble across some deep, deep books that you won't find in the library, and you won't find them in a lot of places. You might be able to find them in a college library, but the better books will be in these metaphysical bookstores. Now, you might find them in a Barnes Noble from time to time, and they can order them for you. But just walk up in a metaphysical bookstore, and your eyes will be open to a lot of stuff, and you'll have a lot of questions. But that's why I'm a proponent for reading books, because videos, they're for people who have short attention spans. Okay.
Like me.
And they just cherry pick all this information, but you need to sit down and crack things, because a book is a long conversation with the person,
with yourself,
that's saying, hey, listen, this point here started because of XYZ, and his research and his footnotes, in the bibliography that show you where this is where this came from, and blah, blah, blah. But a book is a long form search into something. And the reason why you should be reading books is because it allows you to have intelligent discourse on topics that you have been allowed to sit with. Because with a video, you watch it and you turn it off. But a book, you can put a book next to you on the front seat of your car and drive around with it, and then stop, maybe on lunch break or while you're getting a snack, and then crack it open and look at it, and just sit there and be calm and chill and not in a hurry, and absorb the information on your time. So with these consciousness shifts comes new ways of being and new ways of thinking. What I caution all of you in the closing here, what I caution all of you with, is that you have to be aware of what is not good for you, what is not going to help you to grow, what is looking to control you. Leave that alone and reach for the things that expand your awareness, that increase your abundance, that increase your station in life spiritually. Because with these consciousness shifts, there will be those that want to control the route that you travel, the rate of your growth. All right?
Limit you. They're limiting you.
There it is. That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.